We've got Alyssa Hertel here, covers Drake for the Des Moines Register. We're going to break down this Miami-Drake first-round matchup, a very intriguing matchup, a pair of teams that have done really well. Alyssa, 27-7 for Drake, winners of 13 of the last 14 going into it. Just a veteran team. What can you say about this? And we're going to break it all down and get into some more specifics. But this team, what can you say about them and how they've played lately?
Yeah, I mean, Drake from the beginning of the year and Drake in the past 2 months are two completely different teams. I think what's working for them is, they have that veteran leadership. They're also a pretty old team that's dealt with some injuries, and it took a couple of those guys to kind of get back into the groove of things. And so Drake is definitely kind of seeing the fruits of that labor January, February, and now into March.
What stands out to, let's stay on that veteran stuff. A lot of guys that have played a lot of basketball, won games, the senior class with what they've been able to do. They've been to the NCAA tournament a couple years ago. How much has that been a factor, this driving force to make it back to the tournament? Obviously that strong performance, like you said, that second half, and obviously into that tournament game, beating Bradley in commanding fashion. How important has the veteran stuff been going into this here?
Yeah, I think, in Drake's situation, you really can't underplay how much of an impact having guys who have, been to those conference championship games and now guys who have been to the NCAA tournament can be. The thing is, they haven't had all three of those super seniors play at the same time in any of these until this year. So, Roman comes with his own little bit of perspective in terms of playing last year. DJ played the year before that, but wasn't in the game last year. And Garrett is that third sort of super senior who has been in the game all 3 years, but is just now taking on that starting role this year. So they all come with a different perspective. And I think that's really helped. Tucker DeVries is obviously an insane player, but he's still very young. And I think they can help kind of balance his youth and skill with their expertise.
You touched on the three guards. So, the way Drake's team, they've got those three guards that you mentioned there. Tucker, the headliner, with what he's able to do at that 6'7", kind of in that four spot. And then, with Darnell Brody up front there at center, a very interesting team. It kind of mirrors Miami in a sense, the way they kind of match up a little bit bigger on a Miami standpoint with their guards. But with what they want to do, it does look like some similarities there. Jordan Miller's got a handful ahead of him guarding Tucker. Let's talk about Tucker here. Again, the veterans are important, but what Tucker's been able to do since he arrived at Drake these 2 years and setting the stage for people for Miami. And I think when you look at a team like Drake, maybe you think of underrated guys. Tucker was a big deal coming out of high school, nearly a top 100 recruit, 4-star prospect. So this is a guy that was talented and he's delivered at the college level. What can you say about his game, what he's been able to do this season?
Yeah, I think the big thing for Tucker this season, obviously he exploded onto the scene last year. He was freshman of the year in the MVC for a reason. He took the off season and, it doesn't reflect on the roster, but he lost a lot of weight, gained a lot of muscle, just conditioned all around better to transition from that high school to college game that he didn't have as a freshman. And I think, again, we're seeing that pay off. I mean, the fact that a few weeks ago now he was in the hospital for 5 days and bounced back from that sort of infection that he had in his elbow, and you wouldn't know it. He hasn't missed a beat. And so I think that when he can get going, when his shooting is going well, Drake obviously plays well. The advantage is that he is at a level right now where an off game for him, he's still scoring in the double digits. It might take him a lot more attempts to get there, but there are very few games where Tucker scores less than 10 points. And I think that's a big deal for Drake right now.
Yeah, just the one, as you mentioned, all year long, and that was at the beginning of the year. He's just been on such a roll and shooting the ball at a high clip. His three-point shooting, how important is that with his game? Again, I'm thinking of it from a Miami standpoint with their stretch forward with Jordan Miller. Miami likes to play small, but Jordan's going to have to be pulled away from the basket here. And I think rebounding will be a big part for Miami. And this one, if Jordan's having to follow Tucker around, but Tucker's offensive game, his three-point shooting, can you expand more on what he's bringing to the table and essentially how these veterans really rely on his scoring and his all-around game?
Yeah, I think the thing with Tucker's 3-point shooting specifically is he can make it from all over the court. There are some players where their 3-point shots have to come from a certain spot on that arc for it to be successful. Tucker can hit it from anywhere on the arc. He can hit it from the logo. He's done it multiple times in multiple games. He's such a threat because even when guys can get up close in his face and guard him that way, he still finds a way to kind of get over them. And I think that's going to be a big deal. And especially when, DJ is known for his 3-pointers. He holds the program record in that, but he's kind of slowed down on that a little bit. Okai is a guy that comes off the bench and can hit those, but not as consistently. And that's the thing about Tucker is it's consistent. If he gets that first 3 in, it's not going to be his only one of the game. It's that first 3 is a warm up and then they just keep coming. And so I think that's what makes him a threat is that, he's not a 1 or 2 3-pointer guy per game. It's more 3 or 4. Or sometimes he gets even more than that when he gets going.
All eyes for Miami is going to be on the health of power forward Norchad Omier, an all ACC third team guy, double figure scorer, double figure rebounder. It's a big difference when he's not on the court. The numbers, the plus minuses, his replacement, it's just not the same when he's not able to be out there. Drake's got a big guy and a 6'10" there. Darnell Brody's 275 is what he's listed at right now. What is his impact on the team? Because again, he's not one of their top scorers with these other 3 guys that they have, and obviously led by Tucker. But what does he bring to the team? What kind of challenge is it? Essentially from a Miami standpoint, whether if it's Omier or if they've got to go more with Anthony Walker or AJ Casey.
I will say selfishly, I hope that Omier is healthy. He's fun to watch, and I would love to see him and Darnell kind of battle it out under the rim. I think, Darnell has a lot of the size. He has lost 30 pounds in the offseason, so he's a little bit slimmer. It's helped him kind of get up and down the court a little bit better. I think, you don't see the points as much from him, but when he can get going, when he can play his game, there's a reason that they won the MVC championship. And it's because Darnell Brody was able to play his game. You have the big names, but when he can get into the rebounding and stay out of foul trouble, and at the same time drop, double-digit points and hit a 3-pointer for no reason at the buzzer. He's fun to watch, and I think a big part of his impact is when he can get going, the team gets going. He's one of those sort of silent leaders where you're not going to hear a lot from him post-game. He's not going to talk a lot of trash. He's not a very vocal person, but when he can get in his game and sort of especially the rebounding part of it, when he can play the way he wants to in the paint and under the rim, he gets everyone else on that team going, and it's kind of been reflected in how they've played through the tournament so far.
Yeah, we talked about that veteran team that Drake has. They've got a couple 25-year-olds that Roman Penn seems like just a very good floor general, good point guard, not floor general because he can score. I'm trying to, I don't want to limit what he's able to do, but he scores, he gets rebounds, assists, he's shooting at nearly 50% from the floor. Roman's impact on this team and kind of controlling everything from the point guard spot on both ends, because it looks like he's a good defender as well.
Yeah, Roman is one of those that is such a surprise. I mean, in terms of basketball players, he's 6 foot. He's the shortest player in their starting lineup, might even be the shortest on their roster. But what he brings game in and game out is invaluable. I mean, he creates so many opportunities for his teammates. Again, program assists leader for good reason. And the fact that he couples that with, the scoring that he can do on his own. Defensively, I think, he's a little bit of a menace because he's quick, he's shifty, he can use that size to get into spaces where other guys can't and sort of not only create plays for himself, but interrupt opponents' sort of schemes that they have. And I think the biggest thing for him right now is he's playing healthy for the first time in probably his whole career. I mean, he underwent surgery in the off season. He's got a plate in his foot now. And at least as far as he's told me, he's feeling the best he ever has. And, outside of the game, he comes in with a little bit of more experience because he transferred from Siena, which plays at the MVP arena. So that's going to be invaluable experience for Drake, is just having the guy who already is the vocal leader on the court for them, having the knowledge of what it's like to play in that space.
You speak on that knowledge and, the ties and the backgrounds of these players. Something interesting that stood out to me, Miami's point guard, Nigel Pack, his first collegiate game was against Drake. He has faced Penn Sturts and Wilkins. He's played all three of those guys. They've seen him. Drake actually won that game. This is while Nigel was at K-State. That's interesting. I also find it interesting, Sadar Calhoun off the bench for Drake, former Florida State guy. He got a couple wins against Miami, played well against Miami a couple years ago, 16 points, 11 in the other one. So he's familiar with Miami. Everything just changed in the last 2 or 3 years for both programs and these players. But just that familiarity is interesting when these kind of matchups happen. With Calhoun, the bench, what does it look like? What do they need to do well in this one? What's important for the Drake bench to have a successful game?
Yeah, I think, Calhoun is going to be a big part of that. Earlier in the season, Calhoun coming off the bench was an impact player because of his scoring. He can hit threes on a good day, but he did struggle with that. He had, I think, 4 games where he went without any points. So it's kind of up and down for him. The biggest impact that he brings right now is defense. He's stepped up his defensive game immensely from the beginning of the year to now. He's been tasked with guarding some of the best players in terms of MVC matchups when Drake has played them, and he's done it well. He shut down some of the top scorers in the league in this back half of the season. Connor Enright is another one coming off the bench who, might be America's favorite player because he's got a great mullet going on right now, but he also brings, a style to this game that I don't think Drake necessarily has in their starting lineup. He plays a lot like Roman, but he brings a lot more speed. He is quick to get after the ball. He is, I would say, their best offensive and defensive rebounding sort of force. Garrett Sturts could get up there too. He goes after rebounds pretty hard, but the way that Connor Enright kind of just sees everything that's happening on the floor all at once and isn't afraid to get down and dirty, isn't afraid to fight for possessions, and isn't afraid to take fouls because he knows if he can get those, he's likely to also get to the line a little bit more.
From a Miami standpoint, they've got a few guys off the bench that they're relying on. They're hoping Harlan Beverly provides some positive impact minutes, on both ends of the court. Bensley Joseph at point guard, they're able to do different things with him. Defensively, he hit some threes last game. And then also, I touched on Anthony Walker, his valuable presence inside, whether Omier is on the court or if he's limited, whatever it might be. But Walker's certainly a big point. From a Miami standpoint, we've touched on these matchups, Alyssa, with DeVries and Miller, very interesting. Brody and Omier down low, and then Penn and Pack. And I think from a Miami standpoint, they've got to win those other two in particular with Isaiah Wong, the player of the year in the conference, has to do really well scoring the ball, really make an impact there. He had a great run last year in the NCAA tournament, getting to the Elite Eight. So he's got to do well. And then Wooga Poplar has been their 5th option, but he definitely stepped up against Pittsburgh. He's more than capable. He's got the wing size there at 6'5", can knock down threes. Athleticism is there too. So I think from a Miami standpoint, they've got to get a lot of points and win those matchups. But certainly a fascinating game, Alyssa. All of these games are. I want to thank you for jumping on here, providing some insight into the Drake Bulldogs. It should be a fantastic game. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.